Hello and welcome back to the competitive biography of Emanuel Lasker. We have hit match point in the match between Lasker and Mieses. If Lasker wins this game, then he has hit the required 5 wins and the match is his. But I wouldn't count Mieses out just yet. Especially with the white pieces, he has played some very good games. Recall games 4 and 6, he was on the verge of winning and just couldn't quite finish it off. So I would say that there is still just a little bit of suspense left in this match. Let's see exactly how this game went down. With white, Mieses stuck to his gun and once again played the Vienna, so e4, e5, knight to c3, and here Lasker shifts away from his knight to c6 systems and instead opts for the most popular move of knight to f6. After Mieses' move g3, we last saw this opening in the match that Lasker played against Kurt von Bartheleben, and there Lasker continued his classical development system of knight c6, bishop c5, d6, and all of that jazz, but in this game he went for a move that at this time was a novelty, but has since gone on to become the most popular and most crucial move in this system, d5, opting for some sort of a reverse Scotch setup. After e captures on d5, knight captures on d5, normally this bishop would go out to c4, but of course with the pawn on g3, it's going to g2. Lasker takes the knight on c3, and Mieses recaptures with the b pawn. Now here Lasker played a sensible looking move in c6, trying to blunt this bishop here on g2. The next time this opening would be repeated, it would be improved with the move bishop to c5. This was played in the game between someone we've seen before, Rudolf Lohmann, and someone we haven't, a man named Herbert Trenchard, in 1894. Now here Lohmann went very wrong, starting with queen to h5, where after castles, he of course didn't take the pawn right away, but first broke the connection with his king by playing knight to e2. Trenchard defended the pawn with knight to c6, and here we went on a pawn grabbing spree. Bishop captures c6, b captures on c6, queen captures on e5, and after rook to e8, Lohmann had no choice but to take the bishop on c5, after which Trenchard played bishop to g4, and this pressure on Lohmann's king was too much, and he would go on to lose this game in only 20 moves. Now Lasker's move of c6 isn't necessarily awful. It does sort of stunt his queenside development because of course his knight is deprived of its best square, but the actual criticisms of this move are somewhat moot, because here Mieses immediately goes wrong by trying to strike in the center with the move d4. Now why precisely does this move suck? Well, after e captures on d4, which is what Lasker played, the straightforward move of c captures on d4, which is what you would want to play, falls to bishop to b4 check. You cannot block without losing the d4 pawn, and so Mieses would have no choice but to play king to f1, losing castling rights for nothing and otherwise just having a horrible opening. A relatively recent game actually tried to turn this into a gambit by playing the move queen to e2 with check. They were immediately rewarded with black playing bishop to e6, and this bishop became a target. After knight to f3, black took another pawn here on c3, and after knight to g5, they actually just straight up blundered material with bishop to c5. This falls to a rather elementary tactic, which I'll give you a second to calculate yourself. Knight captures e6, f captures e6, and queen to h5 with check. This forks the king and the bishop here on c5. White won a piece and would go on to win the game. This was played in the game between Rolando Orfe and Laszlo Reiter in 2009. While I'm sure the attacking Mieses has no objection to playing gambits, he instead decided to retake the pawn with queen captures on d4. This move is a novelty, and so it's as of move 8 that the players are playing a unique game. Now before getting into any concrete variations, the players first decide to shore up their development, so bishop to e7, knight to e2, and both players castle. So taking stock of the position, we can immediately see that Mieses has this horrible pawn structure, which already means that he's equal, if not worse. And the problem he faces is that his queen is stuck in the center and is a very easy target. Lasker takes advantage of this right away by continuing with bishop to f6. Now there is nothing wrong with trading queens here, and objectively it's perhaps the best move, but this is definitely not within Mieses' playstyle. So he instead keeps the queens on the board by putting his on d3. Keeping the option of trading open, but at least fixing his pawn structure in the process. Lasker's of course not going to do that. He instead plays queen to a5, continuing to put pressure on these weak pawns here on the c-file. Now with the c3 pawn for the moment being adequately defended, Mieses has a move where he doesn't have to respond to anything, and he chooses for this time to play the move bishop to e4, not only creating a double attack against the h7 pawn, but also, as the German chess magazine points out, playing against the move bishop to f5. Now, this move seems quite dangerous. For example, if white continues with a developing move like bishop to e3, bishop to f5 is perhaps the move that Lasker was going to play. It turns out that white has a fairly defensible position if they play queen back to d1 and then manage to get the move bishop to d4 in. Now, the crucial test of this variation is that we need to see what happens if black takes on c3. So after bishop captures c3, knight captures c3, queen captures on c3, I think that the most elegant way for white to continue is to play queen to b1, going after the b pawn. If black defends it, let's say pawn to b6, now queen to b3. You can give up a second pawn here as white because you're able to get more development. Rook f to d1. There's no time like the present for black to trade queens, so queen captures b3, a captures b3, and believe it or not, here white is still doing fine even in the case of bishop to c2. This seems to fork the rook and the pawn, and indeed, after rook over to d6, bishop captures on b3 does come, and it seems like black is just up 3 pawns, but white is just in time with bishop captures on b6. The a pawn is pinned, it's attacked twice, so it's possibly going to fall. The c pawn is attacked twice, so it's very frail. Overall, black's pawns are unholdable, and this should result in liquidation into a drawn endgame when it's all said and done. Now, that's a very deep calculation, and one that even the resulting end position is probably not one that Mieses would be too comfortable playing, so I don't really fault him for instead deciding to play the move bishop to e4 and play against this bishop to f5 idea. What I will blame him for is what happens next. After rook to d8, Mieses takes advantage of his bishop and queen being lined up in such a manner and plays, as expected, bishop captures on h7 with check. After king to h8, Mieses is able to keep his bishop defended and get his queen out of danger by putting it on the e4 square. Unfortunately for Mieses, in this position, Lasker already has a move that simply wins him material. So as per usual, what I want you to do is pause the video and see if you can find the move that Lasker played to win material. All right, 3, 2, 1. It is as simple as queen to h5. This bishop has nowhere to go. Obviously, g6 is covered and f5 is still covered by this bishop sitting here on c8. So with that, Mieses simply loses a piece. After queen to c4, Lasker took on h7, and he was just up a bishop. Now, Mieses didn't resign for a while, but I don't really want to go over the rest of the game. There is no intrigue, so I will let it play out on its own. So if you're wondering why it took me another 2 weeks to come out with this video, this is partially why. I didn't really want to talk about this game. It's kind of hard to generate hype for the final game of the match when it ends in such a lopsided and really unfun fashion. But we see here, after move 25, Mieses resigned the game. He has no way to stop himself from getting mated on g2, unless he plays king to f2, but after queen to g2 comes anyway, the king is allowed to go to e3, but either knight to c4 or knight to d5 is checkmate. So with that, Lasker has won his 5th game, and the match is over. He collects the 400 mark stake and victory over the established master Jacques Mieses. So now we can start the post-mortem. Why did Mieses lose so badly? One excuse that I've seen circulated a lot in the contemporary reports was that he was suffering from some sort of influenza. And while I can't definitively confirm or deny whether this is the case, I've seen this excuse thrown around multiple times in multiple different matches, that I feel very comfortable claiming that this is just absolute bullshit. I do not believe that Mieses was as sick as they claimed he was. I would imagine that more likely factors could be nerves, could be inexperience. Mieses had not played any matches before this and only a handful of important tournaments, or what I'm going to consider to be the most likely option, Mieses is just a far and away worse player than Lasker ever was, even at this time. He's relatively one-dimensional. He knows his opening systems, and he's really competent when it comes to the attack. But as we know from Lasker's future career, he was always a well-rounded and very practical player. And even at this time, I do believe that his skills in managing every part of the game was better than Mieses's. Of course, we can't do anything more than speculate. What we do know for sure is that Lasker has won this match. He has triumphed over his first master, and now the world is, as they say, his oyster. There will be more developments following from this victory in the following videos, so there is much, much more chess to look forward to. I look forward to seeing you there. So until then, take care.